All right, everybody. We start Beaver Politics. It's 5 o'clock. We have a special guest, Scott Douglas, tonight. And for those who are just newly dropping in, Beaver Politics is a space that we've created to talk about Canadian politics and social justice issues. And we wanted to do it by having people come in that we know and trust and are familiar with their message. And we wanted people to come in and have an uninterrupted platform to be able to get their facts and their opinions and solutions out so that we can start working on problem solving our political landscape here in Canada. And one of the main reasons I reached out at first to Scott Douglas was his knowledge about basic civics, because that is an undercurrent in Canada that seems to be destabilizing Canadians as well. So this is the perfect platform to come in and have a conversation about this. We have somewhat of a format where we invite people up into the box while the speaker is speaking, although you will be muted. We just need to do this to get the algorithm going. And then we're going to invite viewers to come up and give their opinions of what was said, offer solutions, clarifying questions, always. Tonight's conversations, we're going to start with Scott, and then we're going to banter back and forth between Mrs. Radical and I. And we're going to fill that half hour full before we open it up to the guests. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mrs. Radical to have a few things to say, who will then introduce Nerdy, and away we'll go with Scott. This only take 2 minutes. Can't hear you.
Welcome to Beaver Politics. Thanks everyone for taking a little time out of your evening to join us. This is Voices Across Canada, citizens across Canada coming together to get their voices out and telling the story as we know it. So thanks for taking some time to come in here. I'm super excited to have Scott Douglas. Well, I'm a little fangirl here. And I'm just going to hand it over quickly to Nitty. Go ahead, Nitty. Nerdy, I'm sorry, I don't know where my bed is. I apologize. Nerdy, go ahead.
I don't know why I can't see myself. Okay, there we go. All right. So if we can make sure that we are all tapping the screen. Tapping is clapping. It's free to do. I'll remind you throughout the live to tap the screen. Also with my little reminders in the bottom. Also, if you can please, so if you're in the boxes, don't tap, unless you're muted, don't tap the screen. You can, just for everybody in the comments. And you can also share, if you share the live. So if you tap the Beaver Politics box and you hold it down, it'll bring up a screen there, and it'll go, if you go send, you can send that out to all of your friends that way. And if you can also join our team up at the top there, there's a little heart right next to our name. It's only 1 coin to do that. So it's like half a cent. Well, of the pumpkin pie. Yay. Subscriptions are $5.49. I think it might be on sale right now for your first month if you do the month to month, like if you do the monthly thing. And all subscriptions go towards supporting the channel. You get access to the really cool stickers in the comments, and then you get access to our Discord as well. And last but not least, we also do have a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, Beaver Politics, I did upload the video from last week, and I'm at home this week, so I should be able to get the video up for tonight, tomorrow. So that is all.
Thank you, Nerdy. I don't know what's happening on my screen. Frozen. Nerdy is frozen. Here we go.
Nerdy is.
Did you guys hear me? What did I cut on?
Yeah, I heard everything you said right from.
Oh, no, why? Oh, I know why. No. Why is my Wi-Fi not on? My Wi-Fi just went out. Hang on 1 second. It just came back on. Okay, my Wi-Fi went out. What did you miss? Where did it cut me off?
Okay, just your video was off a bit.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. All right, I will, I'll pop it back. I'll pop it over to Scott.
Thank you. All right, Scott.
Hey, there you go.
This evening, thank you for your giving your time to us tonight. Our conversation, we're going to do a series here for the next 2 or 3 weeks on next steps after the election to try and come up with some solutions to make sure this doesn't happen here. And so that's where the general conversation is. And I'm just going to hand it over to you now and listen to what you have to say. And then we're going to be asking you some questions and getting the conversation going.
Sounds perfect. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I think it's great what you guys are doing. And so my views, I think, well, I heard something the other day. So the United States sneezes, the world gets a cold, and Canada is the first country to get sick. You know, and so that I think we can sort of come to terms with the fact that the United States of America has sneezed. The most powerful country in the world has sneezed, and some people are happy about it. Some people are not happy about it. I find it. I think it was 73 million people voted for Donald Trump. 121 million people didn't vote at all in the United States. So really 260 million people didn't vote for Donald Trump. So I think we need to, keep that in mind when we think about the United States of America and Americans and what does that really mean? Not forgetting that they are the most powerful nation in the world, and their economy really drives a lot of what goes on in the world, and specifically Canada as our largest trading partner, and we're their largest trading partner. And so we're intertwined economically and to some extent socially with the United States. And so obviously it has an effect and it's going to have an effect on Canada. I thought myself, doing a couple of notes, where can you start? It's like, well, it's already started. Like, he's president in waiting, but he's already started to tap his people that are going to be in his government, in his closest people, in his cabinet. And so right away, there's this level of shock. And, a lot of people are talking about, well, that's the point. Donald, he's a disruptor. Donald Trump is a disruptor, which I think gets a lot of people antsy. And so he has this week announced some pretty shocking appointments to very important positions historically.
But were they really shocking, Scott? Because to me, if you just believe him, this was entirely expected.
True, but worst case scenario expected, right?
He said he was going to burn down the establishment. This really is burning down the establishment.
100%. And I think people can say that they're going to do something, but when they actually start to do it, and it's never really been done before. Today, JFK Jr. as the Department of Health to run he's an anti-vaxxer. He's going to run the Department of Health in the United States of America. Matt Gaetz, you don't even need to talk about the whole, Matt Gaetz and Attorney General. Enough is being said about that. That's just, even Republicans are shocked at that appointment or that perceived appointment. If you go down the list, the Department of Defense and Pete Hegseth, this is a man who wants to eliminate wokeness from the military and thinks that women have no part in being on the front lines. So I know that Trump has said these things, but when you see it in reality, when it's like, oh, is that for real? No, that's for real. That's really going to happen unless these people, go through their confirmation and the Senate doesn't confirm them. But Trump might have a way around that by having a recess and having them appointed without having them confirmed with the Senate. I think we're into the United States is into a whole new world. And I think you're right that he said he was. But then when he was actually week one, he's actually started to do it, and it's kind of shocking to people.
I think it's important that we marinate in that piece a little bit, though, and really like he said he was going to do all of this stuff. We watched him do the most atrocious things before. So as a Canadian, I have to 100%, 150% believe everything to prepare for this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think when somebody shows you who they are, you need to believe them. I think, though, when you look at the election and you look at, what the number one, I mean, Jim Carver, coined the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. And really, when you listen to people post voting and all the pundits and all the data coming back, the number one issue for voting for Trump was the economy. And really, that kind of stuff, like those kind of appointments, are not. He said he was going to do this. He was going to be a disruptor. He was going to turn the Pentagon upside down. All those kind of things. But really, what people said they voted for, voting for him, was to turn the economy around. And so this is something different than the economy. Like, these are really not.
Scott, Tim Krutzman here. It's nice to meet you in person, brother.
Okay.
Yeah. My concern, and I hear what you're saying, and you're absolutely right, and that fellow was spot on about it's the economy, stupid, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have your stable democratic institutions, the economy isn't going to matter. Nothing. What kind of sustaining economy are you going to get if you just destroy it? Like, he's already purging. He'll be purging the military. There'll be no generals that will be abiding by the Constitution. They'll abide by his authority. And at that point, the economy becomes rather pointless. Would you not agree?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking about worst case scenarios, right?
Yeah.
We're really talking about worst case scenarios.
T-Jack, I'm just going to ask you respectfully. The missus and I are going to introduce or do the interview, and then we're going to ask you to pop in on the other part in the half an hour piece, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. I think for Canada, what this means is the biggest thing, aside from the social part of it, is tariffs. Is the biggest. I mean, they are the economy for Canada. The biggest thing that can affect. I mean, other than the United States of America invading Canada and taking us for our water, or for all the other things that we have Canadians. Other than Trump doing that, it's really our economy that's going to be severely damaged by a lot of the policies that Trump has stood for a year and a half and said that he was going to do. And if you say he said he was going to do these things, so he's going to do them. And he's going to impose 10% tariffs for anything, for all countries, regardless of everything other than anything built in the United States of America. 10% tariffs on Canadian goods. They are our largest trading partner. They purchase $500 billion of Canadian products a year, $600 billion. We purchase $500 billion from them. We're such an integrated economic partnership that the tariffs, if they're laid on Canada, I can't imagine that they would be, but if he said if he's doing what he said he does, that is going to have a huge, it could, in the very first year, it could cost the Canadian experts are saying $7 billion to our GDP. It's going to, and I mean, those are, what do I care about the GDP? Well, you care when your company shuts down or starts laying off people, and things start shutting down and people start losing jobs. That's when it really affects the average people. And that his tariffs could have that effect on Canadian industries across the country. And so on top of that, you've got the USMCA, the new NAFTA deal, which is coming up in 2026 for review. And in 2026, who knows what government we will have here in Canada? I mean, if we have a Pierre Poilievre government, if we have a conservative government, if there's an election in, say, October of next year, and Pierre Poilievre's government's going to be in power for less than 1 year, and those people are going to be dealing with a Trump machine and trying to work out or trying to negotiate or keep, because I can't imagine Trump's going to make a deal that doesn't work better for him. And he's going to be using or working with people, administration in Canada, MPs. And what is that going to look like? And how good is that going to be for Canada? The tax cut, Trump is imposing or says that he will reduce the corporate tax rate in the United States to 15%. That'll have a huge impact. Our corporate tax rate is somewhere between 25 and 30%. That's a huge difference. And so investment money will leave Canada. So companies will not open new facilities here or expand facilities here to go to the U.S. It'll be another drag on the Canadian economy and people's jobs and livelihood here. And that will also drive inflation. All of these things experts say that Trump wants to do are typically inflationary. They are going to cause inflation. They are going to cause interest rates to go up. And they're going to devalue the dollar. Our dollar this week, the Canadian dollar, is already being devalued. The good thing is, compared to other currencies around the world that are being devalued as well because of Trump's election, ours isn't doing so bad relative to other G20 countries. But our dollar could go down to like 60 cents. And so if we have a 60-cent dollar, I mean, and Trump boosts oil production like he says he's going to, if he does what he says he's going to do, he's going to produce oil like no other president. How is that going to affect? It's going to drop the price of oil. It's going to, that hurts the Canadian economy. That hurts.
Scott, I read the other day that dictators don't really care about whether their country is doing well financially. Like they don't care about GDPs. It's in their best interest to keep that dollar low and not doing so well. Is that true?
Well, you can look at economies run by dictators around the world, and yeah, you can say that that's really not a primary responsibility of theirs. That's their own well-being tends to be, that brings the question as to Trump also said that there'll be no more elections in the United States of America. So what does he really mean that? Is he worried about, well, this is his last term and in 4 years he's never going to be in politics again? Does that matter? Or is something going to change? And is the Supreme Court going to allow him to change the Constitution of the state?
So
I don't know.
I have another question quickly. And how do you see Trump and Putin and the transatlantic, that whole deal with our water and our fishing and that, they want to get that Arctic way?
Well, interesting, because the person that he made, what's his name? The border czar, Tom Homan. I think he made him the czar of the borders, but when he talked about his role, it was not just the southern border, it was the northern border and the coastlines. Really interesting that he ended that way.
Added that.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. That's the guy that locked up the children in cages, separated 4,000 children and put them in cages. Like that's who he's nominated for his border czar. That same man, Tom, has made comments about the Canadian border. There is a concern. There is a legitimate concern with the fear of illegal immigrants wanting to flee the United States and having to flee over the northern border. Like this is a very real thing for Canada. We have the longest unprotected border in the world of any two nations. And so people in the United States who fear that, well, they're going to be swept up, however he's going to do it, and that their chances are to leave crossing into Canada, especially, if they say they're going to go after criminals first, well, the criminals will be the first to try and leave. So how is Canada actually going to, deal with that is another issue, right, for us. But I don't think the U.S. economy. I understand what Jack was saying and Tim was saying. It's like, does it really matter? If democracy goes to hell in a handbasket, does it all really matter? And if Trump is truly going to be a dictator and run his presidency as a dictator and is going to get away with it because the Supreme Court has allowed him to do whatever he wants to do, then does it really matter? I think it's going to have profound effects. I think Canadians are fooling themselves if they don't think that this is not going to have a profound effect on their lives. And I know you mentioned the missus about civics, and it is a big thing for me because I experience it today in my own life and on TikTok life of people who just do not understand how our government works, and like if you don't understand the basic Canadian civics, and understand that there are things that are happening in the world that you should be paying attention to. You don't have to be a political junkie and a nut and pay attention to and watch the Commons on TV every day. I mean, you don't have to be that, but you should be aware of how our country works at a basic level, municipally, provincially, and federally, and who's responsible for what, and the things that are happening around the world, because we don't live in isolation. Canada, a lot of people think that everything that's going on in Canada is the fault of the people running Canada. It's not. Global impacts. We are a global economy. We live in a global world, and so many things that affect us today, we as a country have very, very little or no control of. And I think people get caught up in this. Everything that is affecting me is somebody locally or in my country. It's just not true. And so I am a big proponent of Canadian civics. I think it should be mandatory in schools. I think starting in grade school, I think it should be mandatory, and maybe first year of secondary school, and not to teach ideology, just to teach basic Canadian civics on how our country and governments work. And so that when somebody becomes a voting age of 18, and they have a basic knowledge of maybe a feeling of responsibility that, hey, I should participate in this thing called democracy in this country called Canada. And so I don't think we have that. It's unfortunate. But I think to get there, we have to really start at a very young age and I think it coast to coast to coast, basic Canadian civics should be mandatory in all schools, no matter the province. But maybe there's some people in politics that don't want people to be educated about politics. I don't know. It seems to be. I don't know. I touched on most of the points that I just wanted to make. I don't think anything. I think the relationship between Trump and Trudeau, I think short term, it's going to be really rocky. I think I just heard today that Ontario signed a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink. So, so I don't know that. I think Elon Musk has already said there's no way Trudeau's winning the next election.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a really rocky road.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
And then I know the missus has a couple questions for you, and maybe nerdy as well. But I just wanted to ask you, do you have one silver lining takeaway? And I know that's a really hard thing to dig up in this moment. But do you have something that you can take away from this for Canadians that's a little positive?
Well, I know. You're a little on the negative stuff, but I don't believe that Canada is broken. So I come from a place where I do not believe that Canada is broken. When I look around the world, on the globe, the planet we all live on, Canada is not broken. There are things that are wrong with this country, for sure. There are things needing fixing, for sure. There have been bad decisions for sure, but we are not broken, and we are a very strong country. And I believe collectively, I think the majority of us are very good, decent people. I think that still exists in Canada. And so I think we will survive. Whatever happens, I think we're resilient. I think we will survive. And I think even though our economy is going to be bashed, I did read an article from a British publication this week that we will get through, that our economy will stand against everything that's going to happen, the things that they project that are going to happen. So I think there is a sign of a silver lining, that we're going to be okay. It's going to be rocky, but we're going to be okay.
Thank you for that. That's good to know. I'd like to get in touch with you. I'd like to know who that is and read why in detail they think that our economy won't go down. That's the privilege of being in a G7 country, isn't it? Because we will be one of the last countries to fall simply because of how well we're doing.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things I made note of your comment when you said one thing. Trump says, drill, baby, drill. When you listen to, I don't know if you know who Mr. Global is on here. He is.
I listen to him all the time. Yeah.
Okay. So Mr. Global put out one today or yesterday that talked about that and how what's really happening is companies are not going to drill unless it's profitable, and Saudi Arabia makes those decisions, not Trump, right? So there's an illusion, he just builds his power with the lies, so to speak. But as a level liberal, and when I hear comments from Trudeau, he says they've been working on this a long time in case this possibility came true, and to sort of have faith in the process. I want more information. What have you been doing to prepare? Can we have a little more comfort than that very, very broad statement? Because I've heard him say it 2 times now. And I want to know about things like NAFTA, who Chrystia Freeland, that was her portfolio. Not NAFTA, sorry, the New Mexican agreement, right? That's going to be, he's just going to ignore that as if it doesn't exist, right? So who's going to be, who's going to be the protector of that agreement, which is a protector of us?
Yeah.
I want to know those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's a really great point. And that was, they put together a Team Canada approach. And so when they went through it, I mean, these are the things that we forget about. The Liberal government has gone off on some really bad roads. They have, but we forget about the fact that Trump got into power and ripped up NAFTA, and they put together a Team Canada approach. They put Ambrose, they put the interim leader of the Conservative Party at the time, Mona, and they put together a conservative, NDP, liberal, provincial. They had conservative provincial leaders talking to counterparts, governors in the states. They put together a total Team Canada approach, regardless of party, a total partisan. And so, the Liberal government did that. They put together that, and we came out of the ripping up of NAFTA with this new agreement, USMCA, in not bad shape. Perfect, no, but not bad shape. We forget about those accomplishments, about the Liberal Party, because there's so many other disappointments. But I agree with you. I'd like to know, specifically, on the issues that will be going forward short term. Yeah, more insights. Absolutely. More insights into actually what they have planned. Yeah.
And thank you for putting me on. I knew that team had been assembled, but under the new government, I call him Tiny Trump, would he do such a thing? Would that even be considered, or are we being amalgamated into the United States under the next Tiny Trump government, right? Like that's a fear. But I'm going to step down with my conversation now. Nerdy, is there anything you'd like to say, or?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, so now we're going to start inviting guests in. It's exactly 5:30, so that's perfect. We have Treaty 6 Birder, and we have Simcoe Gray, and we've got T-Jack, and we have MS Strong. Can't see the whole tag there, but let's start. It's Smarty. Okay. Well, so how about we just start with the order that I said, and Treaty 6, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you for having me, the Mrs. and Mrs. Radical. It's so nice to see you, Scott. This is also interesting and so much to think about. But one thing I do gives me hope is the difference between the United States and Canada is in Canada, the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit people have constitutionally protected rights, which empower us to have a stronger voice at these tables. It empowers us also when it comes to resource development, because there's a thing called the duty to consult that I think I've talked about in the past, but don't have time to talk about here, and makes it really a lot more challenging for countries like the United States to come up freely, access resources. And I can guarantee you the Indigenous people in this country will never permit them to come up here and come after our water. And that's my biggest fear. Like, I'm very scared of this. Putin's coming in from the north, and Trump's going to come in from the south, and they want to, because colonizers will be colonizers. And this is still, like, it feels to me very much like contemporary colonization, and we're just watching it in real time. So I'm hoping that, and I share this. Please, if you have Indigenous friends and family, colleagues, whatever, and remind everybody about our constitutionally protected rights, which are very different from our Native brothers and sisters in the South, and gives us a much stronger voice and leverage to have some influence at these tables. And I did just want to make a little note. I was in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago and found myself hanging out with an MP and some chiefs of staff and stuff. And some of the Liberal insights seems to be that JT isn't willing to step down now because there's some belief that he might be the only one that's able to handle Trump. I don't know. I just want to throw that out there for folks to think about. And if sure, like, he has the experience. He's been there, done that.
I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's riding it right out till the end.
Yeah.
Whatever happens. But I don't think Justin Trudeau is going anywhere. And I think that's just the way it is for the Liberal Party right now.
The bureaucracy in Canada and the amount of things like what Treaty 6 just reminded it of is that we have safeguards in place, right? There's a lot to knock down in order to, completely do a takeover or whatever. So I'm glad you reminded us of that, Treaty 6. That's important.
Absolutely. And I just, so please, like, I don't mind personally, and I'm sure there's a lot of our my relations, and that I encourage you to leverage our rights when we have to, and support us in these fights, because I know that we will be stepping up to fight these things if they're coming after our resources any more than they already have.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to Simcoe Gray. Would you like to say something to Scott or add to our conversation here? Oh, his mic's off, I see.
Hi, yeah.
Hey.
I really appreciate the conversation and what we're bringing to the table here. I was just thinking, when you're talking about the economy and how reliant we are in the United States, and how we are all very afraid of scaring away investment in our country. And there's also a lot of good talk about resources and what that means. In Canada, we're a very resource-dependent nation. I think it's important to point out that companies don't control where the assets are, right? Yeah. They can take their money elsewhere, but the resources remain in Canada. So, we do have value, and I think it's really important as Canadians we recognize our value and stick up for it and fight for it. And there's also a lot of evidence that says that the corporate investment in this country has been lacking. Most of the money that's being invested is not in new machinery or increases in wages, the signposts of good investment in an economy. They've been invested instead in shareholder dividends, buybacks, and corporate profits instead. So taking that into consideration, do you revise your view on our dependence on the United States at all in terms of, their effects being our largest trading partner on our economy? Like, how do we really invest in Canada and Canadians if, attracting investment by lower corporate tax rates isn't doing the trick? Because it's not at this point.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know if we change parties, if we change federal parties. We can't match. There's no way we can match a 15% corporate tax rate in Canada. I mean, the Conservatives, if they win, Pierre Poilievre may lower corporate tax rates. But I think you're 100% right. Like Canada is so full of resources. We are so rich in resources, and that companies, in order to, if they want a piece of those resources, they have to come here and they have to invest here. You're absolutely right, though, in companies in Canada not investing in wages, because I think that's a huge problem for us, is our wages aren't high enough in Canada. They just aren't. Companies are taking those profits and with buybacks and those sorts of things, and are not reinvesting in the people. And I'm one of those people who believes that, we have a problem in this country with companies not paying people enough. I don't know how that gets fixed, but I think that's a serious issue in this country, in corporate, in Canada, in corporations. We just do not pay people enough of a living wage. We just don't. We just don't. And that's where if you look at it statistically, like, you look at GDP per capita, that's where our GDP is okay, but our GDP per capita lags. And really, we're not paying people enough. And we've fallen well behind the United States on the graph of how people are paid and how Canadians are paid. We just have not been kept up to the level of compensation, and I think that's a huge problem.
That's a big talking point in right-wing echo chambers around here, is per capita GDP. They tend to look at it as Canadians are lazy, or individually workers are not pulling their weight or being productive enough, right? And I don't buy that at all, because when you look at the economic picture, the GDP, like you said, is great. The economy is doing great. It's just not great for the people working in the economy. That's the picture that's emerging for me, and I really hope more people start getting that message, because we're blaming the government.
Yeah, pointing fingers in the wrong direction is a big thing. It's a big thing. I know.
Could our government do something to help alleviate that? When the people say the economy, like, it's all great. In British Columbia here, our macro provincial government's doing fabulous. We're one of the biggest economies in Canada, considering, how many people. Across Canada, same thing. Trudeau needs to shine, which is what the feds do, on that macro level. The economy and the trading and all that's working out fine. We're hitting all the G7 targets, right? So we are a rich country. However, the greed at the top is not disseminating that down to us. And then when people say they're voting on the economy, it's the us part that they are trying to have the conversation about. And unfortunately, our governments seem to be upholding the macro levels really good and not filtering that micro piece of the economy down to us. How does that shift? What do we need to hear from, if the Liberal government is reelected, what do we need to hear from them to comfort us that there will be the shift at the micro level?
I think one of the things is the immigration and temporary workers. Temporary workers it's been exploited by companies. You can blame the federal government. You can not look at the provincial governments, and pretend that they didn't have a piece in this. But corporations know that they've gotten away. It has kept.
What's that?
Of temporary foreign workers in this country.
Just
On this, let it get out of hand, and it has been abused by companies and is being used to suppress wages. And companies don't have to pay temporary foreign workers wages that they should be paying Canadians or people with status here, citizens. So I think it's been abused. Is there a need for temporary foreign workers? Yes, there is. But has it been abused and brought into sectors where it isn't necessary? It has, and the reason it has is to suppress wages. It's a big mistake, not only by the federal government, provincial governments, and by corporations in this country.
I want to give you a personal example of what you just said, because in the community I live in, and I have sat on many tables working with violence against women. One of the issues, we had a local fast food chain operator who also owned property, who brought in female workers, and they would house them and make them work in the store. And there was sex trade work involved. And what a nightmare of a story for RCMP to shut down. Now, we're a small community, but you get 10 or 20 women brought into the community to be enslaved within a temporary worker system by employers that will abuse. Now, this isn't every story. This is not a mainstream story. This is one of the extreme cases that I was personally involved with in helping those women to kind of get out of that situation. But it is absurd the way our temporary worker system was abused by employers. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Thank you for adding that. Simcoe Gray, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that's great. I think the one thing I wanted to point out additionally is that if you look at GDP growth in the last quarter, it was public sector employment or service jobs, but public sector employment that was a main driver of wage increases. And that was largely due to some contract renegotiations that raised pay for those public sector workers, like teachers, like I am. So those boosts actually do increase GDP. So that's just a point to bring up to all the people who say that government spending is dragging the economy, or our interest payments or debt payments are too much of a drag and we can't afford. We have to think of debt as investment. That's the proper way to think of it. And there's nothing wrong with investing in people. In fact, I think people are the best investment. That's all I'll add to that.
That's great. Love what you just said there. And so, Scott, now we're going to, Tim's going to come back up. T-Jack, if you're ready. T-Jack has been a guest on our show as well. He's very involved in politics here in British Columbia. Okay, T-Jack, if you unmute your mic. Oh, drop down. Okay. Schmarfy?
It's Marsh. My only question is, I've been hearing that Trump wants to reopen the XL pipeline, and I agree with my Indigenous family member, Treaty 6. With that being said, can he override what the Supreme Court of Canada has done with that, with shutting it down? Or can he somehow make that still become a thing? That's my main concern right now, is the pipeline, because I know that pipeline, yes, it will bring jobs, but it's going to be so much worse for our ecosystem. The land, the water, the food supply, the wildlife, everything. And it scares me. So that's my only question right now.
I don't know about the XL.
It wasn't the Supreme Court of Canada that shut it down. It was SCOTUS down in the States that shut it down. It had nothing to do with us. Trudeau said he wasn't going to do it, or he didn't want it happening, but it was SCOTUS that shut it down.
And if I could chime in, I'm actually an ex-Trans Canada employee and was the KXL lead for Indigenous relations. So KXL has been mostly built on the Canada side. so construction's complete. It's just waiting for an in-service date. Like most of the, like all of the stream crossings are done. A lot of like under the highways and stuff are completed. Good portion of it's been built through private lands. So the permits, it's in place here in Canada already. It's just waiting to tie it in to get across the border.
Okay, I see T Jack is back.
Yay! You know, it's not like you need a master's degree to work the mics on a meeting like this, eh? Okay, I'm going to bring a bit of a historical perspective. First, I want to say quickly that we do teach civics in British Columbia. I can't speak for other provinces. I do think that we should, I agree with Scott, we should move a little bit away from ideologies, although it's good for kids to understand how to determine where they are on a spectrum. I do also understand that I've taught students all the way down to putting that ballot in the box, and then I meet them the next year and they ask me, how do I vote again? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, okay, as far as Trudeau is concerned, I've said this on this show so many times. I don't understand the disconnect between online visceral despising of the man and how he is constantly swamped by people when he's in public. It's like he's adored, and yet there's this perception he's hated. I can tell you this right here and now, with every fiber of my being, there is no way that Canada survives if Poilievre is prime minister. He'll sell us out. The fact is that Trudeau is the son of one of the greatest prime ministers in our history, who brought home our Constitution, and his buy-in to this country is insurmountable compared to any of the other leaders. I'm not saying that Singh and the other leaders aren't decent people, but in terms of a fight on the front line for this country, Trudeau is my guy. The U.S., the United States, in my view, from a historical perspective, is in 408 Rome. They are a shadow of themselves, and within the next 100 years, they will not exist as a imperial power. Mark my words. Of course, none of us in this room will be here in that point. Trump unfettered. If Trump is unfettered over the next 2 years, if we do not get a next, I agree with Scott, we will survive. If anything, if you look at how we built the St. Lawrence Seaway, we told the Americans, guess what, guys? We're going to go it alone if you don't join us. And it was through that effort that the Americans said, we got to get on board. Canada is going to go it alone. We have the ingenuity. We have the resilience in this country. If we could just get Canadians to get back the way they felt in 2015, the way that Trudeau said, this is not our Canada. Our Canada is a resilient Canada that does not resort to fear. But this country, in my view, seems to be gripped in fear. We also have to get Canadian citizens past this. My grocery budget and my gas bill, as they're lining up for $7 lattes and buying new televisions, drives me insane. And the hypocrisy of Canadians. And when it comes down to as well, I honestly think Trudeau's hated because he's progressive. He will stand up to violence against marginalized peoples. And he has led the way on that. And he is resented for it by white supremacists in this country. And they control a lot of the airways in Canada. And we are seeing that in this platform we call TikTok, which in itself is a far-right platform. And we talked about this, Mrs. Radical, last night. How many of us are being shadow banned, our numbers are down. They don't want to hear the message. What else have I got here? Yeah, I mean, Scott, my hope is I still believe in a Canada of 2015. I'm with you on that. You and I are kindred spirits when it comes to Canadian values. And I'm not talking white supremacist crap and colonial crap. I'm talking decency, kindness, tolerance, acceptance, celebrating diversity. These are things that we cannot ever negotiate with the United States. We cannot jeopardize the universal health care plan. We cannot change gun legislation. We cannot become a shadow of ourselves just to try and make it work with Trump. And PP will do that. He'll sell us down the river, and Trudeau won't. That's what I got.
Oh my God, I want clapping noises. I want clapping
I
noises.
love that. That's amazing.
Thank you for listening.
That was wonderful.
It truly was.
Anyway, Jesus.
Next time, tell us how you real feel.
Right?
We lose touch with the hope and that feeling, right? Because we get, that feeling it's been long gone, right? It's been long gone, and we just need to get right in touch with it. I liked, Tim, what you had to say about Trudeau's investment in Canada as a country because of his father's legacy and because of the way he's lived a life of what's the word? I'm at a loss for words. Because he's lived a life dedicated to the Canadian way. I think he's been influenced differently than we all have. And his father was one of the last people that could look ahead at Canada and dream for 50 years. That's what I see missing in a lot of our politicians today. Scott, to go back to another part of the conversation early on, when you first came on, you said, that 260 million people did not vote for Trump, right? And you just kind of flipped the equation about how when people don't show up to vote, you get Doug Ford, you get Daniel Smith, and you get Scott Moe, right? When all these kind of weirdos are getting appointed to these positions of power, can the Senate, in their efforts to stop the appointments, can they do that? Can he just override it with a simple, I don't care what you guys say, I'm doing it? Is the Senate the stopping block for that?
I believe the Senate is a stopping block for that, unless what he's trying to do, or I heard he's trying to do this week, is have a recess. And so during this recess period, he can appoint and make these people, put in these people into their roles without Senate confirmation hearings. The stopgap is that through the Senate, they would have hearings and they would vet them. And so they're going to be questioned, just like the Supreme Court. They're going to be vetted. You're going to have people from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, talking to them. And so, of course, if there is any skeletons in a closet, they're going to come up. And so to bypass that, can Trump, he can, there's a way around that he can have them appointed without them having to go through that. And I believe it's the recess, which he's trying to get done now, or he's trying to have that done. I don't know if that's successful. I don't know enough about American politics, that specific part of American politics that it can actually work. Otherwise, they have to go through. The question is, does anyone want to be defiant and vote? Do any Republicans want to vote no to a Trump a Trump person that Trump is putting forward for a position? Do you want to be a senator, a Republican senator, and vote no? What does that mean for you? You will have, MAGA going after you. So that's the question too, is will these senators actually have the stones to say, no, this person is not qualified for this job? So that's another thing too. It's a very unusual situation, but this is, this is what Trump said he wanted to do. He wanted to turn everything upside down and inside out and be a disruptor. And so it looks like, starting this past week, that he started that process. Will it continue on that way? Who knows?
And will it lure Canadians away from wanting that far right-wing turn here in Canada? Or will it open the door for that? I don't know.
Great question. And how will Canadians will Canadians applaud what's going on? Will they be going, look at that? I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want anything like that in my country. And so what will that mean for Pierre Poilievre's perceived lead in the polls over the next 3 to 6 months? Once Trump is inaugurated,
I think that's Canada's only silver lining, to be honest with you, is that, and it's a hard silver lining, right? It's not going to be easy to watch this. This is going to be worse than a train wreck. It's going to hurt us all. But watching it will have that opportunity to maybe change some hearts and minds.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to offer Chloe the opportunity to have some conversation. I see she's joined the box here.
Hi, I live in Tennessee, and I can explain about the whole Senate situation since I know there's been some questions. This is just to my knowledge, so I am filling in what I've read and heard and had conversations with people. In my view right now, we have three parties in the States. We have MAGA, we have Republicans, and we have Democrats. And so our newest Senate Majority Leader, Thune, is not a MAGA loyalist, and Trump folks are really mad about that. So they are trying really, really hard to not let Trump do these appointments in recess, even though Trump is literally threatening to remove these people from the Senate if that happens, which he can't do because we voted for them. So it's been very interesting. I am very scared, but I also want to hopefully let the U.S. be an example for Canada. And so hopefully we don't have to burn down too much to be an example, because I kind of want to stay in my house and keep my health insurance and not go crazy. But I'm always so interested in the conversations that I hear about, with folks and friends up in Canada, because, I've lived in the U.S. my whole life. And it's my Canadian folk and the friends that I've met up in Canada that actually made me very interested in my own politics. So I was super blind for a very, very long time, and then learned that I live in one of the most conservative states in the country. So we're really screwed. I'm trying not to curse. So yeah, I am here. And yeah, drill baby drill is not likely going to happen. Mr. Global, like we've said, is the dude to follow for all things, because he's not on the left, he's not on the right, he just shares facts. And I love that man to no other. So yeah.
And if you ever want to feel your need around swearing, check my channel.
I never know if some people on panels are, I don't know, sometimes we're more family friendly than not. I'm a single childless cat lady who gets food stamps and relies on our Obamacare for health insurance. And so if our systems go down, I'm going down really fast. So yeah.
Beautiful gems in Tennessee. Those two black men that were booted out of their positions as elected officials.
Yes, they were. Yep.
I know them, and I think they're wonderful. And so, I know those voices exist in Tennessee.
Yes.
Because you are definitely one of the states that is unfortunately just red.
Yeah, Billy, our governor, needs to go, and our senator, Marsha Blackburn, needs to go. And once they're, it's just, this whole election in and of itself is just very, very, I'm 30, I'll be 31 in January, and so this is the first time I even remember who I voted for president. That probably sounds really terrible because I've been able to vote for much longer than just this election. So I think there's messaging that definitely needs to be shifted a little bit, because Trump's misinformation kind of held on to the airways for
So
most
one
common folk.
about inviting people from the United States into our conversations is because the pushback is going to come from within the United States as well. And there's going to be a lot within the feminist movement, by the way, and I'm hoping to bring some of those solutions into this conversation here on Beaver Politics, because that's what we need. We need movement in Canada to fight back, and the movements are going to be small, incremental movements that all happen at the same time. Right?
Yeah.
It is, I think, getting, as people, we like to support community into local. So you have to find your local group and become active that way. Or at least
Yeah,
I feel that has
I'm
a
a
lot.
little blue island right here in my town. I have not met another Democrat in my city yet. I'm very afraid to spend a lot of time out in public because pew pews are a crazy thing here, and I used to be a first grade teacher. So,
Chloe, I just want to share with you that you're not alone. We have, we are on Discord as well, and we are actively thinking and trying to create and come up with plans and solutions to support. So just know you're not alone, and our hearts are with you.
thank you. Yeah,
No,
I'm
you're
trying to
never
like
alone.
stock up on things like that my whole community might need because, Roe was overturned and that whole thing. So I've got things for folks if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yes.
And just trying because everything's about to get very, very expensive. And so I'm trying to make my tiny little apartment a little community resource as much as I possibly can.
Nice.
Thank you for that. I know you take risks in that.
So yeah.
I noticed that Women Against Polyev has joined the group.
Hi, hello from beautiful Palm Springs where I'm sitting right now. Scott, in your honor, lots of golf here, which I don't actually like, but anyhow, good for people who like golfing. And my question is, first of all, I love your content. I'm one of your biggest supporters. And my question is with this Starlink package or this purchase that Doug Ford just made, or this agreement, do you see, and I don't know the answer to this, I've sort of been trying to look, but is there any way that the government of Canada can put a stop to this, or is that just not happening, not a possibility? It's a really serious thing, I think.
Yeah, I think there. I don't know if it's Brussels or, and somebody might know. Correct me. There's a European country that's banned Starlink from operating. And so I think in general, we've just not really thought this through fully. Right. And I don't know if it's gotten to the level. I know that there is discussion now about, Elon being so involved, and he's sort of in the government now, but not really in the government, but he's going to be in charge of efficiencies, whatever that means. And it's like, okay, but you have billions of dollars of contracts and you've got this Starlink that really, how does it work and what is the capabilities of Starlink without trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but really, how much control are we handing over to this individual who doesn't seem to, I think to the average person, doesn't seem to be fully altogether. And so, and has some very strange ideas about the world. And so, and I don't think those are shared by everybody. So I hope that it becomes an issue. I hope it becomes more of an issue and more in a public forum of discussion about what is this and like, hey, what's the checks and balances here for this Starlink? And I just saw the news today about the province of Ontario, $100 million for Starlink and providing internet access to remote communities within the province. And I thought to myself, really? Like, I'm hearing way too much about Starlinks like lately. And so I don't know, but I think there should be some balancing checks and some investigations as to how much power are we giving over to this company. You know?
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Keep doing what you do. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to remind everybody that the people sitting on this panel and the people sitting in these boxes, please do not refer to yourselves as conspiracy theorists. This term is saved specifically for people that do not believe in science. They believe that the earth is flat. None of the people that sit in this space are conspiracy theories. I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Labels, labels. Yeah, I think we have a lot to throw at in terms of, our concerns about a conservative government at the federal level, right? Sometimes, like, our conversation is very focused on what will happen internally to us province to province. Like, I know in British Columbia, we're so happy to have an NDP elected, because if Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the BC coastline was far-right conservative and then Tiny Trump gets in, that whole coastline opens up for trade in ways that would be what I would say suspect and dangerous to the environment and some things like that. But control over moving oil and gas, which is the main funder for Polyev, right? So he's working with them. But I took comfort in our province having an NDP government. If a conservative government gets in, there'll be some checks and balances, so to speak, on either end of the country. And like coast to coast to coast, it's all progressive right now, right? So we have some checks and balances, but it's going to be hard to fight moves like what Doug Ford just did. That's just, guy is selling out everything in Ontario.
I don't know enough about it. I just saw the headlines today. I haven't read the articles. I haven't really delved into it, but yeah. I mean, really, and how much influence did Starlink have in the U.S. elections? What was the capability? I mean, I don't know that there's answers. So I don't know. I think it's a lot. I think we need to slow down with Elon. My own personal view, I think we just need to slow down on Elon and everything that he's doing. And put the brakes on and make sure we're doing the right thing with him and his companies.
Is this just a breaking story? Because I've not heard about it at all until tonight's show.
Yeah, I just read it today.
Okay. In order for for that to be a headline, there had to be a lot of steps taken to get there.
It is a breaking story.
So how long have they been planning this? And yeah, what's it look like? Anyway, so many things to keep us knocked off our feet, right? To keep us off center, to keep us, out of understanding our political world. And going back to the basics of its conversation, if you have that, you have a foundation, right? You have a foundation.
I have a question. I feel like, and I know that there's some people that feel the same way as me, but I think liberals have a big issue with communication. I think I've seen the NDP work on it pretty well and make some changes. What do you think the liberals can do to change things up as far as their communication issues?
Well, it's a huge issue. You're 100% right. I mean, communicating the things that they have done well and the way in which they've helped Canadians, so many Canadians, bringing children out of poverty. I mean, they have not communicated. The Liberal government, the Liberal Party, in 9 years have not communicated well to the average person the things that they have done, the successful things that they've done. And so they need I don't know, they have a new campaign leader, but they need a team of people. Pierre Poilievre has been extremely good since he became of the Conservative Party on communicating. Love him, hate him, he has been really good, his team around him, in communicating. And they have gone out and they've communicated his message, their message, as hollow as it would seem to me, but they have communicated it extremely well. And they have. And they've gone across all medium platforms, and they've done an extremely good job of placing him where he is. And conversely, I always go back to, well, the Liberals have been busy running the country. They've been dealing with a pandemic. They've been dealing with, they had to deal with Trump and ripping up of NAFTA. And then there was the pandemic. They've been dealing with all of this stuff. Have they had the chance? But they have been terrible at communicating the things that they have done, for Canadians, because they've actually done a lot of things, good things.
I will share with you that during the last Liberal campaign, they tapped into a medium called Greenfly during their election. And I had the opportunity, we all talked about making change. So I decided to get out there and work in a campaign office. And one of the amazing things about that was they were spreading that message, like they had memes that they were sending out to everybody every day about what was going on and what the next issue was coming up and how we could support that and the things we could be putting out there. And I think they need to be doing that, but on the daily, because this election is happening right now, whether Elections Canada wants to admit it or not.
Exactly.
Well, Pierre's been campaigning for a good year and a half now. So they took it and they, whatever, bending the rules or however you want to call it, whatever they've been doing, but they've been sending out their message. He's been talking about being the next prime minister, and vote. All his slogans, vote for common sense. I mean, he's came and the Liberals haven't. They haven't raised the money. This is a big problem. The Conservatives have raised a tremendous amount of money. The Liberals, not so much, and the NDPs even less. But they don't. It's not to say that the Liberals don't have the money. I don't think they've been spending the money, and they haven't been doing it wisely. So there needs to be, in order for the tables to be turned, there really needs to be. I don't know if I think it's a little bit too late for the Trudeau government to furlough government and for them to shut down Parliament and do a complete reset, and then come back in the new year with a complete reset and a whole new strategy. But in order to do that, they need some really good, bright people to be on their side and going forward, and chiefly to communicate, and some really great policy that is going to capture the imagination of Canadians. Outside of that, I think it's going to be tough sledding for the Liberals. Yeah.
I have a suggestion. Why don't they just hire the dudes that the Conservatives hired for messaging, offer them more money, bring them on to the new team? This is all, they're all capitalists. They're all just seeking money. Somebody out there brilliant at 3-word slogans. Get that guy.
Hire Jenny B. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think there are ways that you can do it, that they could actually start to turn around a bit, because I work with some of their campaign preparedness teams, and they're campaigning like it's 1982, which is we need to be nice, we need to not flag our opponents, we don't use social media anywhere near enough, which is a huge mistake. And like Scott, you say that they need some very targeted policies that are going to help people in their pocketbooks. And be standing up for Canada with whatever's going to happen out of the States. But what I see is they just are in this old style mode. And so far, I don't see any movement in that. And that's really unfortunate for Canada, because I noticed just on my own very small social media account that the videos that I do where the Liberals are actually explaining what they're doing, I get like hundreds of thousands of views on those. And people, even who don't like the Liberals, are like, well, it's nice to hear them explain something. And like Polyev, who's on my every single freaking social media account I have 20 times a day, these guys aren't. So I do think, like you say, Scott, if they can get some smart people in there and they can get moving in the modern world, and deal with what they're up against. And the psychology of these slogans is really clear. They work. They're very effective, especially when you repeat, repeat, repeat. I don't personally think this is rocket science myself. Not that it's easy, but it just doesn't seem to me that there's any step forward in that. At least not that I've seen in the little bit I've been involved.
Yeah. There was talk, I guess, coming out of their last caucus meetings that things were going to change and that their messaging was going to be aggressive. I haven't seen any of it.
Nope.
To tell you the truth, I haven't seen any of it. So, but you're right. I see Poilievre's messaging all the time on all the platforms that I'm on. So it's a big job and it's a big hole that they got to climb out of.
Scott, Tim here, do you have any suggestions as to how to impress upon the federal Liberal Party? Do we just call head office? Is there like a number to provide suggestions? Because the idea of taking the high road is done for me, and I think that needs to be communicated to the federal party. What's the best way to get that? Like, I can recruit people to be sending message after message. But where should we go? Like, is there like a communications director that you know of? Is there where do we go to say, hey guys, it's time to get our act together. Let's go.
Yeah. I don't personally have any contacts to give a call to, other than, people need to be involved. People need to be involved like locally and that's what it is. You got to reach out to your local MP and blast them, right? And talk to them. And I mean, if you're like me and if you really want to get involved, you put your hand up to get involved. But like that's.
Ooh, what was that?
Tim, I just like. I hope to God that they, because it does. It looks like I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and the Liberals look like the Cowboys. They're being decimated by other teams. They're not even in the game. They have to get in the game, and I honestly saying right now I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it get enough into the game. And it is, I don't know if this will play out. I don't know. And I hope that they don't sit back and think, well, we're just going to watch what happens in the U.S. and it's going to be a big enough wave and people's opinions are going to get scared. The strategy in the U.S. with Biden or the Democratic strategy of he's the boogeyman, it didn't work. Strategy of or the saying of Jim Carver, it's the economy, stupid. People need to feel like there's going to be change that affects them. They have to feel that, and just saying that guy's bad isn't going to work. It's not good enough. It's not good enough.
I hope
that's not me.
No, I'm just wondering if you can help. I'm just, I don't know.
No, that's the gift goals. That's TikTok. That's the gift goals. That's what happens.
Oh, okay. So we got gifts, and that's where all that noise is coming.
Yeah,
from.
if you look at the thing up at the top, it's because it hit our goals.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I just thought maybe I was the only one hearing that.
No, that's for everyone.
Okay. I think Smarshy wants to get in and have a question here. Smarshy?
I don't have a question. I have a request. It might be a long shot, but here's the thing. I think everyone before a new election, at least 2 years before, they need to take critical thinking classes. That would do so much better for our polling and the knowing about what they stand on and what ground they are, because critical thinking is so important. And I'm trying to explain to one of my friends who I've known for a very long time, and she's like, I believe Trump will do good for the US. I said, here, I got some information for you. Look it up. Tell me what you think. We'll talk about it. Because I do believe critical thinking is something that people should be doing, should be using, should be implemented in high school, um, implemented in college when people are coming out and voting for the first time. Like that is what I think we should do personally. Because if critical thinking was actually a thing for everybody before voting, it would help out a lot. I think that's what it would do, but that's just my opinion anyway.
Can't disagree with that. Can't disagree with that at all.
While that sounds like a really good idea, that actually like would suppress the vote even more though, because you're giving people hoops to jump through in order to go vote. And the whole thing of like our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is that we have the right to vote, and it would take away from that right by having to take a
Okay.
class in order to do that.
Oh,
It was just a thought.
No, I know. It's been brought up in other lives I've been in, like that people should like take a civics class or something like that beforehand. But that actually like it's more hoops to jump through. And in all honesty, like we're lucky that we don't have all those hoops that the States has to jump through, because like their federal election is run at the state level in every state, whereas here we have Elections Canada who runs the whole thing across the board. So it's
Right.
the same in every province for the federal election, whereas it's not the same in every state for their federal election.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Unless you had, the only alternative to that is election to vote in an election is mandatory. And I think, is it Australia or New Zealand that has mandatory?
Australia does that.
So I don't know what the penalty. I believe there should be at the very least an incentive to vote, some sort of a tax, sort of like getting RRSPs, where if you vote provincially or municipally or federally, that there's some sort of tax rate that you get that's meaningful to people. And so, but I think aside from making it mandatory, I'm not opposed to mandatory voting, but if there was mandatory voting, I would want people to at least have some basic Canadian or at least some civics understanding of what they're voting for. But I don't know that we're ever going to go there. I don't think so.
well, our school systems are provincial.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of conservative governments that have attacked what goes into curriculum, I suppose, along the way. But I remember being educated in civics all through my schooling, and so I'm old though now, so I don't know what's happening. T-Jack says that that's happening here in British Columbia. Civics are being taught, but there seems to be an exit from civics once people leave school, once that environment is away from them. And always, people are so wrapped up in food and shelter needs right now, it's very difficult to think about critical thinking skills. And so for that, I think the way they have people starving it's a capitalist dream to have this many people. Mr. Radical?
I'd like to just piggyback on that. I had some experiences teaching in Alberta. We do teach civics within Alberta in the grade 5 and 6 and then beyond, part of their curriculum. But what I found to be most disruptive in Alberta was the provincial government is getting their hands into that curriculum and changing it up as we speak. Well, actually, when Kenny was in government and they were changing that up, that becomes very distressing. I picked up a grade 3 curriculum book 5 years ago, and it had a picture of the missionaries and the Indigenous students running through the field happily. And that was the depiction that and the paragraph written together. And that was in social studies, right? So there's some issues with that. But I wonder, when we talk about critical thinking, one of the things that I noticed for Republican voters, conservative voters, they all mostly subscribe to being Christian, and they're going to church every Sunday, and they're doing this every Sunday, and they're breaking bread together every Sunday. They're having these conversations all the time. So their critical thinking is happening every week. So they have decided months and months before they get to that, if not years, before they've hit that voter booth. And I think that liberals can learn a lesson from that. We need to start creating communities. We need to start breaking bread. We need to get together and celebrate each other and have these conversations. Mormons do it, right? Marijuana said that. We see Muslims get together. We see Catholics. We see Christians. Across the board, they're having these conversations. And we would do better to strengthen ourselves in that area.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Great point.
Well said. And the bottom line is most mainstream churches, when we see churches training disciples, we think about the good book and they're all learning that to pass that message along. But the truth is, in many mainstream churches across Canada, they are teaching disciples on how to get involved in your local elections. They're teaching the civics right in the churches, and they're teaching people how to vote, who to vote for, and guess who's spearheading. Guess which party is benefiting from all of this tapping into that base, right? We've seen the pictures of Polyev with the cross burning in the back, with the Easter stuff. And he has tapped into that group of people, and they are organized. And they are organized to create disciples, to become school board members, to become city councilors, to become MLAs, and to become MPs.
And when you think about that, I again will ask people to go to Netflix, watch The Family. This is a documentary, and it explains the long game of what the Christian nationalists are doing and the National Heritage Foundation are doing within Canada, and how disruptive it really has become and how strong it's become.
How strong.
Because if you don't know, you don't know.
100%. 100%.
And I see we have a new guest up here, Angela. What would you like to say? Your mic's off.
Is it on now?
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just getting on right now, and you're speaking in regards to how the church influences politics, right? And it strictly does, right? We've seen that in the American, and we also see now on the Canadian side as well. And that's something we should be concerned about. And like you mentioned, the fact that we should come together on this, because we're in a critical point right now. We don't have an election right now. We don't have a federal schedule right now. But the reality is that we don't know what's going to happen, right, in the next 11 months. And we have one particular, which is the opposition, who's already been branding himself for the last 2 years. So what he is doing is he's going to every sector. He's going to the protesters. He's going to the churches, every single church he's going to, so that he can gain trust in them, in him, so that in return they'll vote for him, right? And that's something we need to be concerned about. I was listening to some lives today, and I honestly never been so terrified before in my life, because a lot of the youth are getting caught up in this. And that is really, like, those votes are extremely important in any form of an election, right? So we really need to start informing and getting the message out. The problem is that our networks out there, so we're talking about our news networks, are not educating voters. So you can see in by-elections, because by-elections, they don't have much in campaigning that you really see or hear anything about, right? So we do have some debates. But anyway, so when there's a by-election, you'll notice that certain networks will kind of emphasize on one particular party, right? And they're not being fair to all the other parties that are like we saw the St. Paul one. Now, when I was watching CTV News, because I like to watch it when they do these things, I noticed that the emphasis was strictly on the conservatives, and it wasn't biased. So what happens is voters go in, and they vote, or they leave, and they get interviewed, right? So as they're getting interviewed, the journalist will say to them, so what were you, so what was the reason why you voted this way, or why are you going to vote this way? And people are going in, voters are going in, if it's a federal election, they're going in with provincial issues. But yet they're not being corrected. They're not getting educated. They're not being informed. And this is something that we really need to emphasize on right now. We need to get more education out there. Because they're getting in parties, like for instance, the conservatives are actually really strengthened right now. But that party is strengthened by him, by Pierre Poilievre. And we need to be very concerned because he is bringing so much of the Republican style here to Canada. And if that happens, that's going to be something that we need to be concerned about right now. Because I watch him very carefully, and I watch his body language, and I watched him during Parliament. So remember when we had the president of Ukraine come? Right? So in Parliament, everyone stood up, and they clapped for him, right? For the president. Pierre Poilievre couldn't look at him. He didn't even clap for him. So he's bringing Trump-style politics into Canada. We know that right now, right? But a lot of individuals don't. Because they're concerned about, what's the major things they're concerned about? Is affordability right now. Affordability is on everyone's mind. Groceries, gas, houses, housing, right? That's all on their mind right now. So we're going to the same issue as the United States. That's why Trump got in the United States, because the messaging wasn't out there. So whereas J.D. Vance was going after groceries, gas prices, or whatever, unfortunately, Camilla, which isn't fair to her because she didn't have a chance, okay? She only had 2 months to campaign. So they weren't emphasizing on that. So when I was listening to the voters in the United States when they're on these live things, they're saying, I'm concerned about my groceries. I'm concerned about this. I'm not hearing that message in the Democratic, right? And they swung over to Trump. Because they remember in 2016, before we had the pandemic, right, hit, they think that he's going to do this wonderful thing, which we know he isn't, right? We know he isn't. But anyways, Pierre Poilievre is copycatting him. He's 100% copycatting him. And that's the biggest fear I have right now. Because he's doing the same messaging. He's saying, oh, groceries are high, gas is high, housing, and people are buying into it. And mostly our youth are buying into it. And that's Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think I have an echo. You're absolutely right. Is there anything you can respond to back on that, Scott?
No, I think it was, I mean, the comment that, Canadians have it wrong. So many Canadians have it wrong. Provincial. I mean, this to me, like really during the pandemic, 95% of all of the mandates that I had to deal with were here in the province of Ontario were imposed by the Ford provincial government. Yet, I on this app and even in my life, I'll hear people say, Trudeau with all of those mandates. And it's like, well, what mandates? Like, if I didn't leave the country, if I wasn't a federal employee, then really there wasn't any mandates from Trudeau that affected me. The grocery store is closing, the mall being closed, my golf course being closed. That was all Doug Ford. That was his mandates. and provincial mandates weren't all the same. In Quebec, they had a curfew. In Ontario, the golf courses were closed. I mean, these were provincial leaders, and the provincial leaders, all of this anger and angst about mandates, it just blew me away that most 95% of the mandates that you had to deal with as a Canadian were provincial mandates. Yet the premiers seemed to get away unscathed, and it was just, this is Trudeau and this is all Trudeau. I don't know if that was because of the convoy and because of the redirection of anger towards the federal government and specifically Justin Trudeau.
And Scott, remember they all had a conference or something when they put all of those restrictions on all of us across Canada, those premiers, they all took off to Maui.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'd like to add is the reason that they did introduce those restrictions were because Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government were able to appeal to them with certain funding. And we talk about the restrictions like they're a bad thing because they're perceived that way by the, I'd like to think the minority. And I think what we often do, and I've noticed just even in my videos, when you start attacking the Conservative Party, it doesn't really get you anywhere because people will say, oh, you're lying. That's not true. You're misinterpreting it. But if you really focus on the good that the current Liberal Party has done, or the good that, the NDP has done, and you really hone in on that and you start being that positive voice, it appeals to more people because then people go, you know what, I've been thinking that, but everything around me hasn't been that. And that's the problem. There's like a lot of confirmation bias. There's a lot of people are hearing, misinformation over and over and over again. And people are hesitant to speak about all the good that's been done. So instead of they're bad, talk about why the other's good. You know what I mean? Because I'm just noticing for me, I'm not reaching many people when I'm trying to condemn the other party, but people have a hard time disputing facts when I'm talking about the good that has been done, right? Like even comparing Trudeau to other world leaders and things like that. So, and I think that's where you're not receiving the same stupid talking points. Like you're not getting pulled into, oh, our freedoms are being taken away because you're talking and highlighting about how, he's put bills forward for transparency and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chelsea. But I do think that there is a large amount of Canadians or individuals who are misinformed about what level of government is responsible for the things to them in a day-to-day basis. Whether it's their health care, whether it's their education and the school system, or even housing, which is something the federal government has never really been involved in. We didn't have a housing minister in Canada until the Liberal government, the most recent Liberal government. There was no such thing as a housing minister.
Well, actually, it was Mulroney who privatized housing after Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So before then, the last time we had good housing was with Trudeau's father, and that's another positive point. And somebody's saying, "Oh,
but
sorry."
Just the misinformation, just the misunderstanding of what government really has the effect on. And I just feel, in my non-TikTok life, I just this apathy about understanding why do I need to understand? It's all the same. I don't know if that's a municipal issue or a provincial issue or really a fundamental lack of understanding about how our multi-level government system works in Canada.
This is such a good conversation. I'm just a little worried about time right now. Usually we're done at 7:30. How are we for time, Nerdy and the missus?
I need to end within the next 5 minutes because I have a cat that I have to give insulin to, and it's time sensitive.
Yeah, very important.
No worries. Thanks for having us, and I hope your kitty's doing all right. I'm missing mine so freaking bad. I run a pet sitting business on the side, so I have to go to the place and go and feed them and give them all their stuff while their owner's away. So that is, the peace of mind you're giving people is huge.
We really appreciated you sticking around way past what we usually go to on this show, and you've kept our audience. I'm sure you've brought a lot of your followers with you, and I appreciate that. And I wanted to make also a comment to Angela. Two things that you said that stood out to me. The one thing is about how the media and the messaging. If we look to the right-wing world, we see a lot of right-wing media outlets. We see Breitbart, we see Alex Jones, we see Bannon, we see True North up here in Canada. We see that they have all the places to go look. Where do lefties look?
The Guardian just posted a thing where, because they get paid for by their readers, they're no longer even putting their platform on X because of how bad the misinformation is. So that was a good resource for people, maybe.
They come to Beaver Politics. That's where they come. And with that,
we gotta go.
We gotta go.
Yeah, I did want to say one quick thing about that though. I did post in our Discord a list of like where every paper, it's mostly American, but where most of the papers stand and stuff like that, or where most of the news sources stand when it comes to like misinformation, or like it's red or left or right leaning or centrist. So
fabulous.
There are some good centrist ones.
You know, we need something like The View here in Canada.
Yeah.
No,
You're at the Beaver Dam, baby. That's where we're at.
So we need it so that's like a cable station or something where it's going to reach a little bit more.
I agree with for sure. Yeah.
Because unfortunately, with these sources, only 20% actually are paying attention, but they're paying attention to those networks and stuff like that. So it's
take it away, nerdy.
Yeah. I was just going to say really quickly, the episode, like today's talk will be on YouTube tomorrow morning. And I really wish that somebody didn't follow you two, because for most of the day or most of the time, like the last half hour, you guys were both sitting at 69 coins. And I just thought that was funny.
That is funny. I didn't know what that meant.
You need to get a little joke there. Okay, thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you for.
Is your Discord in your link? Do you have a link to find your Discord?
Can I send it to you tonight?
Actually, you subscribe to us.
Okay.
Subscribe? Okay.
Yeah, if you subscribe to the channel, then you get access to the Discord there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Bye. And have a good sleep, because I know it's late back there. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Scott Douglas. Have a good week. Thank you, everyone.